The Department of Education is choosing to allow discrimination against trans students. The Trump administration is still going after trans service members. Republican lawmakers vote to make an anti-gay activist a lifetime federal judge, and politicians are trying to shut down an LGBT student group in Tennessee, but alumni are fighting back and they need your help. We'll have the week's top LGBT news plus actions you can take on Weekly Debrief. Weekly Debrief is made possible by everyone who pledges $1 or more a month on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/mattbaum or click the link in the description to help keep these videos going. The Trump administration is about to unveil a new policy on trans people in the military, and although we have no idea what it's going to be, we can safely assume it's not going to be good. For months now, the administration has maintained that trans people should not be allowed to serve, and although they've tried to implement a ban, courts have so far ruled that there's no legal basis to do so, allowing trans people to continue to serve. But now the Department of Justice has revealed that they're expecting a new policy to come on February 21st. There's no telling what that policy might be or how it'll be any different from the administration's past failed attempts at implementing a ban on trans service. All we know is that the Trump administration remains hostile to LGBT people. Meanwhile, this week the Department of Education announced that they'll no longer investigate acts of discrimination against trans students in locker rooms and bathrooms. Previously, students could file federal complaints if they were discriminated against by their school. For example, a few years ago, a school in Wisconsin tried to force trans students to wear bright green labels identifying themselves as trans, and also to ban them from using bathrooms on school grounds. In cases like that, students could ask the federal government to intervene. But now the government's new policy is that if those complaints are coming from trans students, those complaints will be ignored. This means that schools can now impose significant barriers to trans students getting an education, banning them from using facilities that they need to use while going to school. With the government no longer advocating for equal access to the military and to education, LGBT people's best recourse is now to turn to courts for protection. And courts have so far tended to rule in favor of equal access. But that might not last much longer. Trump is stacking the judicial system with radical anti-gay activists. These appointments are lifetime, so we could be stuck with these judges for decades. This week, a Senate committee held a hearing on the judicial nomination of Harry Nielsen. Not only was he one of the lawyers who defended Prop 8, but he argued that gay judges shouldn't be allowed to hear cases involving gay people. And more recently, he argued that same-sex couples shouldn't be allowed to get married because they're unfit to be parents. Nielsen's nomination passed the committee by a party line vote. Now he heads to the full Senate for confirmation. If he's confirmed, it's a lifetime appointment, which means that future cases involving LGBT issues could be heard by a judge who spent the last decade trying to block access to equal rights for queer people. Lawmakers in Tennessee passed a bill that strips funding away from the University of Tennessee's Pride Center. That means the elimination of services such as support groups, training to prevent sexual assault, dealing with STIs, combating homophobia in sports programs, and more. Programs for LGBT youth are vital, particularly in states like Tennessee, where they're more likely to be ostracized. The closing of the center could leave many students with nowhere to turn. But now alumni are stepping up to keep the center open. They're going to need to raise about $3 million to make up for those budget cuts. So they've launched a campaign to raise those funds, and an initial fundraiser has brought in about $300,000. But that still leaves a long way to go. So this week's action item is to visit volmeansall.org, the vol refers to volunteers, and chip in to help keep the lights on for LGBT youth in the South. Thanks to everyone who supports Weekly Debrief with a pledge of $1 or more a month on Patreon. There's rewards for folks who pledge, and you help make these weekly videos possible. Visit patreon.com/mattbaum or the link in the description. You can get in touch at mattbaum on Twitter and leave me a note in the comments about what stories need covering next week, and I'll debrief you again soon.